Hey Flock, Mike here from Epic Duck Studios, and welcome to the assembly guide for Star Wars Shatterpoint Clan Kryze Mandalorians. If you're a little bit confused, these are the two good guy Mandalorians from the starter set. Before you begin, I do recommend pulling up the assembly documents from epicduck.com/Shatterpoint. Those are the official assembly guides. There's a few places where some improvement can be made though, and I'm hoping to show you those here. The Shatterpoint starter set came with 2 sprues full of characters, and there is 1 Mandalorian on each sprue. You can see the female Mandalorian here on the same sprue as Anakin and Bo-Katan. The male Mandalorian is on the second sprue near the top center. To build these models, I'll be using Mr. Hobby Mr. Cement S. It's effectively the same glue as Tamiya Extra Thin, except that I can get this locally. To make sure I don't end up with just a pile of parts on my desk, I'm going to clip all of the parts for the Clan Kryze Mandalorian female first and leave all the male parts on the second sprue. Build these models one at a time. If you find you're missing any pieces on your sprue, especially small pieces like helmets, check the plastic bag that the sprues were located in. I had 2 small pieces break off and fall in there. Once all your pieces are safely clipped from the sprue, you'll want to take your hobby file or your X-Acto knife and just start cleaning up any little bumps left over from the sprue and any mold lines as well. I like to remove mold lines using an X-Acto knife held roughly perpendicular to the surface that the mold line's on and just lightly scraping it. It's a repeat motion. Every little scrape, every little pass brings out just a little bit more of the mold line until you're flat to the surface. Now, some of the parts for this model are fairly small, especially the torso. So I'm using a bottle cap with a little bit of poster tack to hold the piece. That way I'm not risking the plastic glue running into my fingerprints and just messing the model up. With a decent amount of plastic cement added to one side of the torso, I push the second half on, and then the putty lets go. I make sure I'm not about to shove my thumb into a puddle of glue at all, and then just push it back into the putty there. The Mandalorian helmet is also 2 pieces, so I'm going to use the same trick, add it to the putty, add some plastic cement, and then push the 2 halves of the helmet together, and let it cure for a few moments before it comes off the putty. Now the last sub-assembly for this mini before we really get started is putting the 2 legs together, a little bit of plastic cement in the middle, and they just press together nicely. They're well keyed, so you can't really get this one wrong. Now there's a little void between the thighs where you can add a little bit of cement, plus some across the top. And then you're just going to take the torso and push it down on there, wiggle it a little bit so it sits on that key, and then just push it down lightly from above, make sure it seats nice and tight. Don't forget to attach the holster and pistol to the Mandalorian's right thigh. Next you want to attach the jetpack to the Mandalorian's back. Thankfully there's a very large tab and some good surface connection that really makes this easy to do. Just get a decent amount of cement on there and really squish it together. Hold it for a few seconds, let it set, you'll be good to go. After that, you'll want to attach the Mandalorian's arms. The order you do these in doesn't really matter. Unfortunately, I wandered off camera a little bit, so you're not going to see the right arm go on. The helmet goes on very much the same. You just want a little bit of plastic cement in the hole where the neck is, and push that tab in, seat it firmly. Make sure you're paying attention to which way the helmet is facing. The last thing to do is to attach the smoke plume to the base itself. I just use a lot of plastic cement here, make sure it's nice and tacky. Some people prefer to use super glue, both good choices. Plastic cement does work, but some people will report that models will pop off these bases because they are slightly different plastics. So really just use whatever you're comfortable with. I'm just going to hold the model in place with a little bit of downward pressure for probably about 20 seconds to make sure everything seats nicely, and then we're good to go. Mandalorian 1 is done and we're on to the second. So now we're going to move on and build the Clan Kryze Mandalorian male. He's a fair bit simpler simply because he's not riding a jetpack. As before, you'll just want to clip all the parts off your sprue, gather them up, and then begin hunting for any mold lines and little nubs of sprue you need to clean off. There's really nothing unique or challenging about this model. It's a pretty standard gunfighter pose, just standing there and shooting with his pistol outstretched. The good news is that means the assembly is really straightforward and there's no real gotchas here. Now, depending on how tight your flush cutters get to the model, you might have this little tiny bit of gate on the side of the torso just underneath the arm. It's worth making sure you spend some time cleaning this one up because it's pretty visible because of his pose. The other really notable mold line runs across the top of the helmet. I was also left with a pretty sizable little chunk of sprue on the side of the backpack. It was pretty easy to take off the pair of clippers and shave down with the knife though. With all the pieces cleaned and prepped, it's time to start the sub-assemblies, which is just the torso, the helmet, and the legs, exactly the same as the first Mandalorian. As before, I'm using my putty on a bottle cap trick because it's just a lot nicer than holding onto the pieces with my fingers and getting glue all over them. It just makes things cleaner. Now the back of the helmet has the rangefinder on it, and sometimes you'll find a little mold line running up the side of that. Be very, very careful trimming that mold line off because it is a very small, fragile little piece. With the sub-assemblies done, it's time to attach the legs to the torso, a little bit of glue across the top of the legs, and a little bit in the crotch area because there's a bit of overlap there. And the torso just slides right on, holds really nicely. And this Mandalorian has a little holster for a pistol on the left thigh. Before you attach either of the Mandalorian's arms, you'll want to get the backpack on there because it's nice and flat to the torso and won't get in the way of the arms, but the arms will probably get in the way of the backpack. You can assemble the arms in any order because they don't really interfere with each other. They're both sticking out opposite sides of the torso and don't intersect in any way. One thing you've probably seen, but I haven't actually pointed out, is that when I put two pieces together, I usually wiggle them a little bit, and that's to make sure that the plastic cement just makes contact with as much surface as possible. It's pretty easy to figure out which way this helmet's supposed to go because he's looking right down his gun arm. At that point, assembly is done, and we just have to put the model on his base. A little plastic cement on the feet, and just push down on those toes nice and firm, hold it there for a little while, and we've got two fully constructed Mandalorians ready to go.